Section 1. Defiance in the desert, when international calls fall on deaf ears. The world watched. The United Nations Security Council, in a rare show of unity, demanded an immediate ceasefire in Rafah. Israel, however, remained defiant. The Jewish state, citing its right to self-defense, continued its military offensive. This defiance, while perhaps unsurprising to seasoned observers of the conflict, underscores a critical tension. It lays bare the limitations of international law and the stark reality of power imbalances on the global stage. When push comes to shove, the dictates of national security, or what states perceive as their vital interests, often trump international consensus. This is not just a story about one nation's defiance, it is a microcosm of a broader struggle. A struggle between the ideals of international cooperation and the often harsh realities of realpolitik. The situation in Rafah serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the urgent need for a more just and equitable world order, one where international law is not merely a set of guidelines, but a binding framework for state behavior. The international community, often divided and slow to act, finds itself at a crossroads. The ongoing violence in Rafah poses a fundamental challenge. It challenges the very notion of a rules-based international order. If the UN Security Council, vested with the authority to maintain peace and security, cannot enforce its resolutions, then what hope is there for a world free from conflict? This is a question that should resonate far beyond the halls of the United Nations. It is a question that demands the attention of every global citizen. For as long as powerful states can act with impunity, the promise of peace and justice remains elusive. The world must decide. Will it stand idly by as these principles are eroded, or will it finally muster the political will to forge a new path, one where international law and human rights are paramount? Section 2. Echoes of History, the genesis of a decades-long struggle. To understand the current crisis, one must delve into the annals of history. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not a recent phenomenon. It is rooted in decades of displacement, occupation, and mistrust. The seeds of this conflict were sown in the early 20th century, with competing claims to the same land. The Zionist movement, seeking a Jewish state in Palestine, and the Palestinian Arabs, resisting displacement from their homeland, clashed repeatedly. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War led to the creation of Israel, but it also resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. This event, known as the Nakba, catastrophe by Palestinians, continues to shape the conflict today. The 1967 Six-Day War further altered the landscape. Israel occupied the West Bank, East Jerusalem and the Gaza Strip, territories that Palestinians envisioned as part of a future state. The Oslo Accords of the 1990s offered a glimmer of hope. These agreements were meant to pave the way for a two-state solution. However, the peace process faltered, hampered by continued violence, settlement expansion, and a lack of political will. The failure to achieve a lasting peace has had devastating consequences for both Israelis and Palestinians. It has fueled extremism, deepened divisions, and perpetuated a cycle of violence that seems intractable. The international community, burdened by its own divisions and competing interests, has struggled to play a constructive role. The United States, a staunch ally of Israel, has often shielded Israel from international pressure. The Palestinian Authority, weakened by internal divisions and heavily reliant on foreign aid, has limited leverage. In this context, the recent escalation of violence in Rafah is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a much deeper malaise, a reflection of the unresolved grievances and unfulfilled aspirations of both sides. Section 3. A world divided navigating the geopolitics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The international community's response to the Rafah assault has been mixed, reflecting the complex geopolitical dynamics at play. Western nations, while condemning the violence, have largely refrained from taking concrete action against Israel. The United States, invoking its long-standing alliance with Israel, has blocked any meaningful UN Security Council resolution that would censure Israel's actions. On the other hand, many countries in the global south, particularly in the Middle East and Africa, have been more vocal in their criticism. They see the situation in Rafah as part of a broader pattern of Israeli aggression and impunity enabled by Western double standards. This divide within the international community has made it difficult to forge a united front in addressing the crisis. The absence of a coherent and principled response has only emboldened Israel, further diminishing the prospects for a peaceful resolution. The conflict has also become increasingly enmeshed in the global struggle for influence between major powers. Russia, eager to reassert its role in the Middle East, has positioned itself as a potential mediator, while also using the conflict to score geopolitical points against the West. China, with its growing economic and political clout, has also become more assertive in the region, offering itself as an alternative partner to both Israel and the Palestinians. This geopolitical maneuvering has further complicated an already intractable conflict. With each actor pursuing its own interests, the plight of ordinary Israelis and Palestinians caught in the crossfire fades further into the background. The international community must recognize that the pursuit of narrow national interests at the expense of peace and justice is a recipe for perpetual conflict. Only by prioritizing diplomacy, dialogue, and a genuine commitment to human rights can there be any hope of breaking the cycle of violence and achieving a durable solution. The human cost of this impasse is staggering. The Gaza Strip, already reeling under a crippling blockade, faces a dire humanitarian crisis. The recent escalation in violence has only exacerbated the suffering of its inhabitants. Hospitals, already stretched to their limits, struggle to cope with the influx of casualties. Essential supplies, including food, water, and medicine, are dwindling, threatening a humanitarian catastrophe. The people of Gaza, subjected to repeated rounds of violence and deprivation, are trapped in a cycle of despair. Children, bearing the brunt of this crisis, face unimaginable trauma and hardship. Their education disrupted, their futures uncertain. They grow up amidst the ruins of a conflict they did not choose. The international community cannot remain indifferent to their plight. Humanitarian aid, while essential, is not a solution. It is a band-aid on a gaping wound. The root causes of the conflict, the occupation, the blockade, the denial of basic rights, must be addressed. The international community must move beyond condemnations and calls for restraint. Concrete actions are needed to hold Israel accountable for its violations of international law and to pressure all parties to return to the negotiating table. The time for empty rhetoric is long gone. The lives of millions hang in the balance. The world must act, and act decisively before it is too late. The people of Gaza deserve more than just survival. They deserve justice, dignity, and the right to live in peace and security. The international community has a moral imperative to make this a reality. The alternative is unconscionable. The situation, while dire, is not without hope. Despite the violence and the entrenched narratives, a glimmer of possibility remains. The yearning for peace, though often drowned out by the drums of war, still flickers in the hearts of ordinary Israelis and Palestinians. Civil society organizations, both within the region and internationally, continue to work tirelessly to bridge divides, promote dialogue, and advocate for a just and lasting solution. The international community, despite its limitations and often conflicting interests, can play a constructive role. It can leverage its diplomatic and economic weight to incentivize meaningful negotiations and hold all parties accountable to their commitments under international law. The two-state solution, while imperfect and increasingly difficult to achieve, remains the most viable path to a durable peace. This requires a fundamental shift in approach, one that prioritizes diplomacy over military might, dialogue over demonization, and empathy over apathy. The alternative is unthinkable. Continued conflict will only lead to more suffering, more instability, and more extremism. It is a dead end, a betrayal of the aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians who yearn for a future free from fear and violence. The time for bold leadership, for visionary statesmanship, is now. The world must choose. Will it continue down the path of endless conflict, or will it finally summon the courage to build a just and lasting peace? The answer to this question will shape the future of the Middle East and have profound implications for the entire world. The stakes could not be higher. The choice is ours.